Hello everybody, Mac here. Welcome back to the show. Welcome to 2025. It is a new year and there are going to be some new things going on with the channel this year. Looking back on 2024, it was probably the most successful year that I've had for the channel. The subscriber base increased dramatically. I hit 1,000 subscribers. Thank you very much for that. The views went up. Once again, thank you very much for that. Audience engagement, audience interaction picked up as well, and I really appreciate that. I love answering the questions. I love the comments at the bottom of the video. I love talking to you guys. It's really enjoyable, and it just makes doing this all the much more fun. Like, I have fun doing this no matter what. It's the main reason I do it, but getting to actually interact with all of you, that's fun, that's cool, I appreciate it. Let's keep it up. Second, yes, the tree is still up. It'll probably be up for the majority of January, to be completely honest. If you were here last year, you probably know that. Also, in 2024, there were a lot more videos like this, in front of camera videos, and I found out I actually enjoy it. I have fun, I enjoy doing these, so that is going to continue. But having said that, you may notice there is a difference in the formatting right now. In the past 4 months, when I was doing the holiday videos, everything from Retrotember into December into Christmas, I kind of liked having like that border, having the center image of me shrunk down, and then the images being over here, being larger, being the focus, and giving it that layered look. So I feel that for the foreseeable future going forward, these types of videos, these in front of camera videos, this is going to be the formatting. The other videos, like the review videos, things like that, they'll still be full screen, full size. But for things like this, I think for now, I'm going to be using this style of formatting. I just think it looks good. I like the way that it looked. I like the way that it layered. I just thought it looked better, added a little something more to it. But like I said, don't worry, all the other ones will still be like full screen. So, having said that, let's dive into what we are doing. Oh, wait, also, I knew I was forgetting something. So while there were changes to the station, to the channel last year, there's going to be more changes coming up, more expansion. Nothing major. This is one of them. But also, as far as Friday night game night goes, because I've been getting more involved with that, I've been getting into that a little bit more. We, of course, are doing the Spirit Queen's Torment that will take us into this coming October, into Halloween. I'm also going to start doing, like, video game playthroughs that we'll be putting up for Friday night game night. And the first one of that is actually coming up at the end of this week, that I'm going to do playthroughs for G.I. Joe Operation Blackout. And I picked that because, one, I got it on sale, $4. And two, this is a predominantly G.I. Joe based channel. It's just sort of turned out that way. And Operation Blackout hasn't gotten the best fan response. So I wanted to do a playthrough on it. I've played through some of it, but I'm starting over again. Just so if people were curious about it, if they wanted to see if it was as bad as they heard, or just see what it was all about. Also might just be a little fun. So the first chapter of that will be going up this coming Friday at the end of the month. Or, I'm sorry, at the end of the week. So keep that in mind. Keep a lookout for that. It's not horrible. I'll just say that right now. I'm not going to spoil too much for the first chapter, but it's definitely nothing like, wow, gotta get it. You'll see what I mean if you tune in and watch the video, which you absolutely should. Now, I started off last year with this, with my top 5 wish list figure lines for 2024. And some of them from last year are going to make an appearance on this list. Some of them have been removed. Some of them have been changed in their position. And there are some honorable mentions, one that I'm probably going to get roasted on a little, but we'll see what happens when we get there. So without further ado, let's just dive into this with my number 5 pick, and that is Soul Calibur. I know. Nothing has really happened with the IP. for a very long time. We haven't heard anything about a game since 2018, I think. And the IP is kind of dead in the water. But that might mean that it's cheaper to get your hands on? Who knows? Maybe? I don't know. All I can say is that I really enjoyed this game. I love this game. This was actually the first fighting game I played before even Mortal Kombat. Well, that's not entirely true. I played Mortal Kombat when I was a kid. Okay, this is the first, like, next-gen version of a fighting game that I played before I got back into Mortal Kombat. I really love the characters. I love the weapons. Like, this cast of characters from this line was, like, made for action figures. You have Cervantes, an undead pirate. You have Raphael, a vampire fencer. You have the Lizard Man, which is just what it says on the tin. You have whatever Voldo is. You have Nightmare, for goodness sakes. There's just so many different types of characters, such a diverse group of characters that you could pull from for this line. And then every figure could come with, you know, their standard weapon, plus their Soul Calibur version of that weapon and their Soul Edge version of that weapon. Plus you have all of the different looks across the different games, different costumes, paint swaps or complete costume swaps. Like, I think this would be a really good line for action figures. You also have the potential for your deluxe figures with larger characters like Astaroth. Or you could do a deluxe version of Nightmare where he actually comes with his Nightmare. There's a lot you could do with this. And I think for like a 1/12 scale figure line for this, I say give it to Jada. Let Jada take the reins on this and run. Like, it seems like video game lines are where they're making their money. That's their bread and butter. And they've been doing a fantastic job so far. Let them take a shot at this. Speaking of video game lines, and this next one, my number 4 pick, did come from last year. It actually got bumped from number 5 up to number 4 because I think there's more of a realistic possibility of this line happening versus Soul Calibur, and that is The Witcher, specifically The Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt. And I know technically there's already a line out for this, but McFarlane Toys hasn't done anything with this IP in a really long time. And for as long as they've had it, well, I shouldn't say for a really long time, for probably about a year now. And for as long as they've had it, we've only had 4 characters come out. A Netflix and video game version of Geralt, a Netflix and video game version of Ciri, a Netflix version of Jaskier, and the video game version of Eridan Briok Glass, and that's it. We've had none of the other main characters, we've had none of the supporting characters, and there are a lot of characters to fill this line out. We've had 2 versions of The Witcher, Netflix and CD Projekt Red, The Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt, and we haven't had a Yennefer in either line. How do you do this line and not make a Yennefer? She's one of the big 3. She's one of the main characters. She's just as relevant to the story as Geralt, and there's no Yennefer in sight. And the Witcher 3 Wild Hunt version of Yennefer is awesome. Like, that character should be on our shelves. Not to mention, we keep talking about the Wild Hunt. We didn't get a Wild Hunt. We got a leader of the Wild Hunt, but we didn't get the Wild Hunt, and we got no mount, and there's just so much that got missed on this one that if the license is coming due, let somebody else take it. And my pick to handle that would be Diamond Select, because there may be a amendment to this once I get the figures in hand, but I feel like with their House of the Dragon line that they have coming out, those figures look really good. I'm anxious to get my hands on them, the first wave, that I think they could do a Witcher line to stack right up next to the House of the Dragon line. Whether they go with Witcher 3 or whether they go with the Netflix series. And especially with The Witcher 4 being advertised now, and I forget when it comes out. I can't remember if it's coming out this year or next year. I think it's this year. So with Witcher 4 coming out, there's the possibility for even more characters to get added into this line. So, I mean, right now we still have Yennefer, Triss, Vesemir. You could bring in other Witchers like Latho. I don't remember if that's how you pronounce his name, but he was the Kingslayer from The Witcher 2. So there's so many characters to mine for this. Oh, and there's also the monsters. Like, you'd think that would be like McFarlane Toys' like bread and butter. That's right in their wheelhouse, the monsters. But we only got the Frost Giant from the video game. Two versions of that, the standard and bloody version. And from the Netflix series, we only got the Kikimora. And there are so many other monsters to pick from. Like, there's a lot to mine for this line. And I think Diamond Select could do a really good job with that. So that takes us, speaking of monsters, and I am the king of segues with this, the next line, my number 3 pick, which I believe this was the same slot for them last year, but my number 3 pick is one that Hasbro owns, and they haven't done anything with it since the 80s, and that's the Inhumanoids. I don't understand how this line has just sort of been there and nothing has happened with it. You have the 3 main Inhumanoids, Moltar, or is it Metlar? Metlar, Tendril, and Decompose. And if you want to stretch that out, there is a 4th Inhumanoid, and that is like the undead version of Sandra when Decompose turned her into his bride. So you have 4 big centerpiece figures right there. And then you have the Earth Core, which is human figures in power armor, which is always awesome. That always sells. And then in addition to that, you have all the Mutors with the Redwoods, the Grand Knights, and Magna Core, the dude that like splits into 2 guys. There's a lot to harvest here. And like the cartoon that it was based on was designed to sell the toys. Like, this was designed to be a toy line first and foremost. And Hasbro owns it right now, and they haven't done anything with it. And last year I postulated that this could be done as sort of like HasLabs with the big Inhumanoid figures. But after seeing what they did with things like what the Marvel Legends team has done with things like Dragon Man and the Sentinel, you could have the Inhumanoids released as limited time pre-orders. Just like a month, month and a half, maybe 2-month long window to get your pre-orders in, then shut it off, and then they come out. They come out the following year. You could do that with the Inhumanoids. You could do the other figures as like standard releases. Because in the 80s, if I remember right, the Earth Core was like maybe 7-inch figures, and you could still put them in Decompose's chest. Like, they were sticking out, but like the Inhumanoids were big enough that you could still fit them into his chest. And fun fact, Decompose is always on my look for list whenever I'm at like RetroCon or something, because like I really want Decompose, but I can never seem to find him. So yeah, I really want this line to come back. And while the obvious choice is Hasbro, there is the issue that the rumor, the feeling, I don't want to say it's a leak because I don't think there's any definitive evidence to it, that Hasbro wants to get out of the toy manufacturing business for whatever reason, stop making action figures, things like that. So if Hasbro's not going to do it, we'll have to wait and see what Playmates does with the Power Rangers line. But maybe if they do a good job with Power Rangers, they could handle the Inhumanoids as well. Because think about it. If they're going to be doing like 1/12 scale Power Rangers with Zords and hopefully making the Zords bigger than the figures, imagine then they're doing the Inhumanoids with 6-inch figures in power armor and Inhumanoids that were roughly the same size as the Zords they're making. And then you could have like the Power Rangers versus the Inhumanoids. Like, how awesome would that be? All right. Now, my number 2 pick, there's no easy segue for this because this just deviates completely from everything that we've been talking about. And that is Arcane League of Legends. Now, there is a League of Legends line out right now. It may be done because they haven't done anything, and when I say they, I mean Spin Master hasn't done anything new with this line in quite some time. I don't think a lot of people knew that this line existed because it was an Amazon only line of figures from what I could see. There was a 1/12 scale and there was like a 4-inch scale, 1/18. And I know the 4-inch line, the 1/18th line, I've seen at Target, but the 1/12 scale, the 6-inch figures, I haven't really seen anywhere other than Amazon. I have some of them. I've done reviews on at least 2 of them. They're not bad. Like, the articulation left something to be desired, but from what I saw on their newer lines, they fixed a lot of the problems, like the ankles and things like that. But I don't think they've really gone forward with it in quite some time. But that aside, I'm not even necessarily talking about the video game. I'm talking about Arcane specifically. And Arcane, the series, has a very different look to it than like the video game figures would. That it has this really cool steampunk effect to it with like metallics and brasses, and like it looks really cool. And there's some figures that you could mine for this. Like there's Vi and there's Jinx, and it's Jinx. It's all about Jinx. I'm just going to be completely honest at this time. Like, I want this line because I want this version of Jinx in 6-inch form. I can't believe we don't have a 6-inch figure of Jinx at all at this point. But if I'm going to get one, I want one like this. This is a fantastic look for her. This is a fantastic version of the character. And I want this version to add in with my Dreadnoks. So this is a little bit selfish. I want an entire line of figures just so I can get that version of Jinx. And I'm not entirely sure who would be best for something like this. One of the thoughts that came into my head was Boss Fight Studio with their Epic Hacks line, especially after seeing Roxy London and, what was it, Delger Bat from the wave that's going to be coming out. She is like a retro future, like Art Deco space hero, and there's some metallic paint to them. There's some very stylistic elements to them that they might be a good one to do something like this. Now, that does mean the figures would be more in the $30 to $40 range, but for as limited as the scope of something like this would be, I don't think that would be terrible. I don't know. Who do you think? Like, the other thought was Hasbro, but I think this is way more like stylized than what the mass production of Hasbro would put out. So that was my number 2 pick. Now we're going to get down to some honorable mentions. And the first honorable mention does come off of last year's list. I plucked them off the list, and that is Metroid Prime. And the reason it's not fully on the list and it's just kind of like an honorable mention is because this is like a niche of a niche. Like, not only is this based on video gaming, this is based on a very specific video game that is only accessible to people who have Nintendo. Now, I do think if this line came out in full, that enough collectors who are into sci-fi would look at it and think, hey, that looks really cool, maybe I should snag that. Because the you have Samus in all of her different suits, you have the Federation Marines, you have the Space Pirates, you have the Chozo, you have Ridley, who is a giant cyborg space dragon, which is just awesome, and then you have the Metroids and Mother Brain themselves. So I think there's a lot to harvest here. I think there's a lot of possibilities, and once again, going based off of this being a video game, I say hand this over to Jada, see what they can do with it. The other one for the honorable mentions isn't on the list because it's not specifically a collection. It's sort of like a subset of a collection that already exists, and that is the G.I. Joe Classified Comic Collection. And this means figures that have appeared in the comic book but were never actually part of the official line. These are characters like Dr. Venom, Quinn, Scarface, Billy himself, the Cobra Commander's son, Laura, the female Crimson Guard, that was involved in the Snake Hunt story arc, and they're still using her, I believe, now that Skyhouse has taken over publishing. But like, well, female Crimson Guards in general, but I would like to see like the Laura head with it, along with like one with an eye patch for the Laura. And I don't think you would have to do like a small eye patch accessory. I think you could have like a different hair sculpt where like the Lauras have like their blonde hair down, but Laura, follow me, has like a different hair sculpt with like the hair pulled back into a ponytail, like when she was in the firefight. And then it also has the eye patch on it. So when you fit it on, ponytail, eye patch, and you have that specific version. And in addition to that, like I would really love if they could somehow get out like a Fred head sculpt for the male Crimson Guards. I think it's a big miss that we got so many different versions of the Crimson Guard, with the classified version, the retro cardback version, and the Twilight Guard, and there was no Fred head. And if you haven't read the comics, A Real American Hero, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. But from what I've seen on Instagram with a lot of people using other heads to substitute for Fred, I think there's enough of an audience for something like that, or enough of a consumer base for something like that, that like we'd all love to get our hands on that. The last thing from the comics line, and I know there's plenty more other than the ones I've been talking about, but these are like the ones that I would focus on the most. But the last ones from the comics line is the October Guard. And I get why right now would probably not be the best time to release this group. I get that. I 100% get that. My final honorable mention is the one that's probably going to get me roasted in the comments below, and that is a new DC Multiverse line. Look, McFarlane has had the line for a number of years now. I think we're going on 5 years at this point, maybe 6. And there's been no real change in the figures. They're just as wonky now as they were then. The proportions are all over the place. The articulation is not good. The face sculpts tend to not be good. The paint apps are virtually non-existent, where everything that's used is color molded plastic and not like actual paint apps. There are some exceptions to this, obviously, but it's not great. It's really not. And some of you may know I'm even selling off my Multiverse line right now on eBay, just because like it's not impressive. To me DC deserves better, and they could do better. So I honestly would like to actually see Mattel get their hands on the line again, because, hear me out, because could you imagine a DC Multiverse line done in the style of their new Masterverse line? I get that Mattel had the line before, and they made mistakes and they messed things up. But I really feel like we've seen this with what they're doing with Masters of the Universe. I really feel like Mattel has learned from their mistakes that they made during those days, those dark days, and they're just coming back with a vengeance. So if they had the Multiverse line again, they could continue like this 7-inch scale line of DC figures that were made to the style of the Multiverse line. The accessories, interchangeable hands, everything. I think that would be really cool, and that would look really good. And then they're already at 7-inch scale, so you don't necessarily have to toss out or just like box everything that you got from the McFarlane Multiverse line. So you wouldn't have to discard those 175 Batmans that you've bought. They would still kind of fit in with this line. Also, with the way they've been doing mashups with Motu, with Turtles of Grayskull and Thundercats coming up, they could 100% do a DC Masters of the Universe mashup, which has happened in the comics as well, or a crossover as well, and you could get that in like the 5.5 line. So there's a lot, and you would have something like Primal Age at that point. So there is a lot that Mattel could do with this line. I would love to see them get their hands back on it. Please don't leave now. We still have the #1 to look at. And that is the end of my honorable mentions. Like I said, that multiverse one might get me a little roasted, but I knew that before I opened my mouth. I'm here for it. That takes us to number one. And my number one line was actually my number two. It has moved up to number one, and that is a line based off of my favorite trilogy of movies, How to Train Your Dragon. There was a Spin Master line that came out when the third movie came out. It was the dragons and their riders and the light fury, and I think that's really all there was to it. I don't think there was anything else. And all of the riders were in their wingsuits, they were 4-inch figures, and they had their helmets on. So it was okay, but I think we can do better, because there are so many other like secondary and tertiary characters from those movies that you could make figures out of. There are so many different versions of the main characters from those movies that you could make figures out of. Of course, there's all of the dragons, both like your hero dragons and the other dragons that were in the background. And it's so bright, it's so colorful, that I think this would be a really fun line of figures. And once again, going back to the company we just talked about, I think this is something that you give to Mattel. And the reason I think that is twofold. One, what they're doing with Street Sharks, with the real feel skin on Street Sharks, you could do that for the dragons. Give them that same texture, that same feel for the dragons, just to make them stand out a little bit more. Plus, that is a very shiny finish to it. It would really make the dragons like pop on the shelf, right? And then you do this to a scale, and I know pretty much everything I've been talking about has been like 6, 7-inch in the case of the DC Multiverse. I think you go in the opposite direction with this, and you go to like a 5 or a 5.5. You do it in the vein of the Masters of the Universe Origins. And I don't mean giving like Hiccup that big buff He-Man body. I just mean that general scale. Because that scale, they put out some really good figures at a really good price with accessories. And it's big enough to appreciate, to get your hands on, to play around with. But it's not so big that they can't make vehicles for it. In this case, the dragons. So I think that is your sweet spot for that. That you do something at like the 5.5 scale for the figures, and then the dragons done with like that real feel skin that Street Sharks has. I think that would make a really fun, really great line of figures for How to Train Your Dragon. And especially with the new live action movie coming out. I'm sorry, I just threw up a little in my mouth right there for that one. But I think there's going to be renewed interest, renewed excitement, whether the movie is good or not, in How to Train Your Dragon. And this would be the year to jump on something like that. So that is my top 5 with honorable mentions wish list for 2025. Probably won't see any of them come to fruition. So this is all just fun speculation, fun wishing at this point. So let me know, comment down below what you think of the choices. Tell me why I'm wrong about multiverse. And let me know like what lines you would like to see. Put them in order if you want to. This is part of the fun of this line, I really think. Or not this line, of this hobby. Just like speculating, guessing, coming up with your own ideas of what you think would be popular, what you would want to see on the shelf to add to your display. So let me know down below. Once again, thank you for coming back, everyone. Happy New Year. I think this is going to be a great year for the channel, and it's great to be back. Happy New Year, everyone. The holidays are over, and it's great to have you all back. To celebrate the new year, go ahead and leave a like on the video. And while you're at it, you might as well subscribe if you haven't already. If you're a returning subscriber, I would like to thank you for coming back and joining me for 2025. If you would like to help this community of collectors grow, you can do so by joining the Steel Core. You can do that by becoming a channel member or a coffee page subscriber. Either one gets you access to members-only videos, the Discord, and eventually members-only live streams, all for $1 a month. You can join by clicking on the button below this video or by clicking the link to my coffee page in the description below. It's a new year and new things are coming to the channel. So play well, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, thank you for watching.